Hi, Kylie. Welcome to the show today. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me, Jesse.
Yeah, so glad to have you here. As I let you know before we pressed play, I have been snacking on your granola all day. I love the cranberry spice. Oh my gosh. I really love it. So good. I love cranberry in general. So, yeah, that's a new favorite. So, thank you so much for sharing with me and just so glad to have you here to get to hear more of the story and maybe start us off by just telling us a little more about your products and then from there we can kind of dig into the background.
Sure. Yeah. At For Good Granola, we make a flavor forward, no oat buckwheat granola. No oats. We completely swap the oats out. The foundation of all of our four flavors is buckwheat, which we shorten as groats, the whole seed of a buckwheat plant. So when buckwheat groats are slowly toasted, they take on this awesome crunch and a really nice nutty flavor. And as I said, flavor forward. I'm a chef by trade. Flavor's super important to me, as is the mouthfeel, the aroma, everything that kind of plays a role. So we're super intentional about the ingredients we include, understanding kind of flavor affinities and how they all work together. And yeah, cranberry spice is one of, I love all my children equally, but I think one of those unexpected. So, when we say cranberry spice, our spice components are really more of a chai spice than a pumpkin spice, right? So you're going to get cardamom, some anise, some star anise in there, real nice kind of bright cranberry seeds. Yeah, glad you like it.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I can't wait to keep eating it. But that probably doesn't sound good on the microphone. But would love to hear kind of the story. It's awesome that you're a chef by trade. So tell us how you went, started your company. Like what did that look like?
How I went rogue. Yeah. I feel, there's so many people, I think, as I learn more and more about this kind of unique niche of emerging brands who started in the kitchen, whether as a true chef or just an awesome baker or whatever it is, and had a great idea. I'm one of those pandemic stories, as there's a lot of us out there. During the pandemic, I had to take a step back from the kitchen. A lot of my kitchen work was within chef instruction and private chef work. And so not a whole lot of people were welcoming outsiders into their home at the time. And then in kind of conjunction with that, I started doing a lot more home time with my family and my kids. I've got three kids, two of which are superheroes, as I call them, who have significant disabilities. And, I've never before really had the opportunity to kind of do something that had a personal connection to my life. And it was really my way of how do I get myself back into my chef mode, doing something that I love in the kitchen and merge it with my personal love, which is obviously my family and my kids. And so the For Good is obviously our granola is great for you, but for me, the For Good is we give to organizations that engage, empower, and elevate kids and adults with disabilities. And obviously that's, super important to me, real close to my heart.
Wow, that's so cool. That's incredible.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
also I also love that you're using buckwheat. I think buckwheat is such an interesting ingredient. It's such a cool crop. I grew up on a farm, so I'm very interested in ingredients and crops, and I just think buckwheat's so interesting. And as a gluten-free, like generally gluten-free house, because my husband has celiac, like having your product be gluten-free and highlighting an ingredient like buckwheat, that's so cool. I love seeing that as well.
Yeah. So, you know, as I had kind of mentioned, flavor texture is super important to me. Um, Buckwheat is a very interesting ingredient on many levels, right? So glycemic scale is super important to a lot of people who practice a gluten-free diet, whether that's due to celiac or other reasons. It's low on the buckwheat as a general rule is low on the glycemic scale at about a 35 compared to 50 for oats. So a lot of people do a little bit better with buckwheat than they do with oats in general. It's a sustainable crop, obviously. There's a lot of awesome things to say about buckwheat from a farming perspective relative to it's a pretty hardy crop. There isn't a need for a lot of fertilizers, pesticides, those kind of things. And it basically regenerates the soil, right? Adds a lot of energy back into the soil, a lot of nutrients back into the soil. So it's a no-brainer from just a smart ingredient to use. But again, when you add a certain level of dry heat to it, it just brings a whole new level of flavor out. And gives you that real satiating kind of texture too. So people pick up on like the almonds as the primary nut in our granola, but they're like, what's that other nut? And it's the buckwheat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm also curious about I've got your beautiful packaging here next to me and like what it was like, especially with your background as a chef where you're generally making food for people and they're eating it right away. And now you're making something that is getting packaged up and someone's going to consume it later. Like what was that process like for you to get it into the packaging that it's into today? And yeah, how did that work?
Yeah. And it's the very common thing of the packaging is printed, it arrives, you open up the box, you get to look at it for the first time, and then you're like, oh, I should have put this on the packaging. But it is an interesting question. I was just having this conversation yesterday because I also during our, we self-manufacture our granola. So even during that process, people talk about, hey, we'd love to see what you're doing in the kitchen. What's it looking like when you're in production? And that's really hard for me as a chef. I'm so used to having the final product in its visual form within how it's supposed to be served, right? So that idea of just showing granola is a little bit more difficult to me. I really wanted to be eye-catching, right? We eat with our eyes first. Flavor is super important. You look at, as I'm looking across my computer at my packaging right now, you look at smoky pineapple and you see that color. It should be inviting, it should be welcoming, it should be warm, all those kind of aromas and visuals that we want people to see when they see a wonderful plate of food in front of them. So color was super important for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. And now that you bring that up, that makes so much sense because it definitely that was one of the first things I noticed was the visual component that it just visually I was like this looks really attractive and granola isn't always a super attractive thing to eat, right? It varies of what it looks like, but you have different colors and flavors and textures and so like it looks incredible before you eat it. Like you get excited, or at least for me I'm like, oh, I'm excited to eat this granola. It's not like oh, I gotta put granola on my yogurt kind of thing. This is a like, oh, I'm super excited to eat this because your eyes are like, oh, that looks tasty.
And it was real hard. We went back and forth quite a bit in terms of do we do the window on our packaging versus doing a picture of the actual finished product. You see a lot more packaging options on the shelf that have an actual photograph of the product. And for us, we just wanted you to be able to see the real thing. I think both avenues are awesome. But for some reason, I was drawn to, I need to see it in that window. Like I want to see what am I getting into as soon as I open that bag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that. And at what point did you find Startup CPG? How did you find Startup CPG?
Yeah, crazy. Well, and so now I've been like screaming it from the rooftops to everyone. I just saw the email that came across that you guys were starting a beauty channel. And I was like, oh my gosh, all these people I've gone through accelerator programs in that have like, I've got to send it out. I've got to send it out. I came across Startup CPG when I was taking part on a Naturally Chicago webinar. Someone had asked a question in terms of a good resource for collaboration with kind of fellow startup, brands. And as soon as I got off that webinar, I did a quick Google and found you. And I, you had made that comment like, let's close a bunch of our windows before we get started. And ironically enough, yeah, Slack's always up. Startup CPG Slack, always, right? I've got a handful of channels I always go to. And the crazy thing was there were, I just signed up for another one before I jumped on our call, focusing on couponing and rebates that you guys have coming up. It's like you read my mind every time. I know I've got to learn more. So it's awesome.
I love that. I'm so glad that you found the group. I know I was so glad when I found Startup CPG when I did, which has been like a year and probably almost 2 years ago. But yeah, I love hearing how people find the group, and thanks for sharing sharing the word about it to other people as well. It's
Yeah.
so cool. We're so glad to have you in the group.
Thank you.
And so, what's top of mind for you going into 2023? Like, what are you thinking about? And then, what should we as consumers be looking out for and start getting excited about?
Yeah. So inward, I formally took a sabbatical from my chef work about 4 months ago. I started. So I'm going to continue on that sabbatical, really spend a lot more time building out kind of our roadmap for growth. Right now, we're focusing on the Chicago area, and that will continue. We'll continue with feet on the street, talking to buyers, retailers, continuing our conversation with consumers, which has just been huge for us. Um, a lot of major metro areas, including Chicago, have some awesome farmers markets, and it's really where we started about a year and a half ago. And we've been super fortunate to continue communication with those customers, and it's real-time market research. So we'll keep at it until we feel like we haven't learned anything else, and that won't ever happen. In terms of outward, what that means, so one of the biggest struggles of a chef starting a product is they want to be in the kitchen all the time, right? Like if I could create a new granola flavor every day, I would be in my glory, but you can't do that. So I'm excited about tackling a couple on the list to bring some new limited release flavors to the market next year. Working on some that fit within maybe the curry space a little bit, bringing in some more gingery flavors. So we'll see what happens with that, but excited to get back and do flavor exploration on that one.
Yeah. Oh, I'm super excited to see what you come out with. I'm also curious if there's any like stories that you have from your journey so far that like really stick with you. It could be a win. It could be anything that's kind of sticking with you or keeping you going in this so far.
Yeah, probably a lot of stories. My more recent one, which was super crazy, I have a customer who um, found me early on when we started, when I was still in that old school kind of craft bag packaging. And smoky pineapple is one of our flavors. I say it's kind of a crazy fan base favorite. Uh, he is notoriously always floating around the farmers markets that I'm at, is like president fan club of Smoky Pineapple. And he is actually right now on an excursion across Asia. And super cool, as he's doing all his exploration with some Smoky Pineapple in hand and sending me pictures of it. It's awesome to see your product go that far, right? It's great to see it on the retail shelf, right? You get on your wish list retailer and you get to go shop in that market and see it. It's awesome. But to see actually someone who's consuming it and loves it so much that they're throwing it in their backpack as they're heading across Asia is so cool. So that's been neat to kind of follow his journey and share it with the rest of my consumers on Instagram and where it's been and where it's headed. But yeah, the joke is right now, Smoky Pineapple has definitely gotten the most mileage. So
I love it. That's
yeah,
so cool. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Wow. And can you tell us about some of the organizations that you support through the product as well?
Yeah, so I had mentioned our Crafted for Good mission in terms of supporting organizations that engage, empower, and elevate kids and adults with disabilities. There's a lot out there, and obviously having that personal connection, I'm familiar with several that we have been able to benefit from, but at the same time, there's a lot out there that I don't even know about, and so that's been super cool to learn about a space I thought I knew a whole lot about that I didn't. So whether it's bringing further understanding to people who don't quite understand that world of disabilities or don't live in it, to show them how they can make a difference. The coolest thing, we just did a partnership with an organization called Clearbrook that primarily works with adults. And I just got a message from Vicky, who I worked with there last week, and she basically had shared, the donation that we made through kind of our specific focus on that partner through sales. We were able to buy iPads for these residents. 175 residents now had access to these 4 iPads, which basically allowed them to do job training, access job opportunities, Zoom with their families, do recreational skill sets, emotional social learning that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. So that's the kind of stuff that's super cool, right? Money means a lot, but at the same time, when you hear those tangible outputs that you're helping with, even as someone who knows how much that need is out there, being able to put that visual in my head is so rewarding, right? And makes it so important for us to continue to find those organizations to partner with and support them as much as we can.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. That's so cool. Well,
Yeah.
I can't wait to keep following along, and that all of us at Startup CPG are cheering you on, and I encourage everyone go to forgoodgranola.com, and then on Instagram you can follow at forgoodfoods and follow along because I'm super excited and I hope everyone goes and checks it out and gets some of your granola in their life because I think they're going to be very, very pleased that they do. So I'm so glad that you could join me today and that I could get to learn a little bit more about you and your story. Thank you so much for sharing with me.
Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate you making the time. And I got to tell you, I mean, you guys are awesome. Everything that you're doing at Startup CPG, we couldn't be more grateful for just the support you're given and the energy that you put out there to everyone. It's huge. So thank you.